Hello everyone and welcome to the channel, and if you're one of the 3 people that watched my last video, welcome back to the channel. India have been comfortably beaten by South Africa. This was a few days ago now. Are they in trouble in this World Cup? Do India have anything to be concerned about? Also, coin toss mats, why do they exist? Do they serve simply as a shameless sponsor plug? When the Super 8 fixture list came out, this match between India and South Africa stood out to me as the biggest fixture in this phase of the competition. In my opinion, these are easily the 2 strongest teams in the tournament. And in my review of the Super 8, I predicted that these 2 would be the 2 teams that would go through to the final. On the one hand, you have India, who have been unbeaten in every single bilateral series they've played since August 2023. Extremely impressive record. And they've also won their last T20 World Cup, and they won the Asia Cup, and they won both of those events unbeaten. So just really strong, really dominant team. They have an abundance of talent with the bat. Their best young players just benefit from playing IPL and competing with the best players in the world early on in their careers. And this abundance of talent they have means that whoever's representing India just has to be performing, otherwise they won't be in the side. It's a level of competition that ensures that there's no passengers in that team. It's a team with a batting lineup that has both explosive players and players that are capable of accumulation when needed, namely Ishan Kishan, Suryakumar Yadav, Abhishek Sharma, Tilak Varma, and Shivam Dube. Their bowling is both really strong with pace and spin. You got Bumrah and Arshdeep with a new ball, and then Varun Chakravarthy and Axar Patel with spin. They're bowlers that can threaten to take wickets in every single phase of the innings. And their opponents, South Africa, they were finalists in the previous edition of the World Cup. And while they haven't set the world alight in T20s over the last 2 years, they clearly got a very strong team with a nice balance of young, exciting talent and experienced T20 cricketers that have been around the block. Some of their young players include Dewald Brevis and Tristan Stubbs, and they also got Aiden Markram, who has really hit his stride in the tournament as the guy who opens the batting and just plays really attacking from the get-go. And they also got 2 experienced heads that have played IPL for over a decade now in Quinton de Kock and David Miller. With the ball, their threat mainly comes through their pace, like Hahisa Rabado, Marco Janssen, Louis Ngidi, and Corbin Bosch has hit a bit of form. So really, really good, strong pace bowling stocks, as South Africa have really always had. And Keshab Maharaj has been doing a good job with the spin. The spin has obviously played a big part in this tournament, and he's been doing a good job in that area. And I remember watching them play against Australia in the winter T20 series we had. And while we did beat them 2-1, I was impressed with the way South Africa played. They batted in a way that was quite intelligent. They looked to build a foundation and then have that power towards the latter end of the innings to put up a competitive score. But ultimately they were overpowered by an Australian side that is really blessed with a lot of power hitters, and that's the type of batsman that can be successful in Australian conditions, and ultimately it was just too much for South Africa. But it's a South African team that has a much more cerebral and worldly style of batting that can be applied across all conditions. Now, in the first group stage of this World Cup, South Africa put in consistent, dominant performances. They won all of their 4 games in a pretty convincing style. It was commanding enough to convince me that they would make the final of this tournament. So it goes without saying that I was looking forward to a really high quality matchup. I was expecting a highly competitive match where India would ultimately come out on top, but in the end it was quite a surprising result. So we had the toss on the coin toss mat, and Aiden Markram called correctly and elected to bat. And this was already interesting, as the meta in this tournament so far has been to field first. And Markram had sort of followed that policy both times he'd won the toss in the tournament. He bowled first. On the broadcast, Ravi Shastri was audibly surprised at Markram's decision. Markram believed this pitch looked nice and hard and didn't have what he described as tackiness early on that previous pitches have had in this tournament. Well, in the power play overs, it did look like this decision had majorly backfired for South Africa, losing 3 for 20 off the first 4 overs. Bumrah clipped the top of Quinton de Kock's middle stump, and Ravi Shastri yelled, "Bowled him," right through his defence, despite the fact that de Kock had tried to hoik the ball over mid-wicket. The opening bowler's accuracy was rewarded again, as Markram tried to smash Arshdeep Singh over mid-off off a ball that wasn't quite there to hit. and he was caught at mid-off as a result. The third wicket was undoubtedly the most impressive, a beautiful off-cutter from Bumrah that deceived Ryan Rickleton. It looks like South Africa were going to be in a world of pain, as India's leading wicket taker Varun Chakravarthy was going to come on in the 5th over. Now, Varun is a mystery spinner, and there have been many mystery spinners through the years that have sort of burst on the scene and absolutely demolished batting lineups that are uninitiated to their variations. Think of Ajanta Mendis and Sunil Narine. And I sense that Varun's incredible figures in this World Cup so far had a bit to do with that. Now, these South African batsmen, Darwin Miller and Dewald Brevis, have played plenty of IPL cricket. Brevis had played 3 seasons by now. Miller's IPL career has spanned longer than Varun's entire career. So for the first time in this tournament, Varun was coming up against players that had become more accustomed to him. Immediately, Miller showed that he wasn't afraid of him. He hit him for 2 boundaries off his first over, and this was the start of what can only be described as textbook middle over batting. Miller and Brevis were able to find about 2 boundaries each over and also rotate the strike very well, putting the Proteas in a respectable position. This included a massive over off Varun, which went for 17 runs. At the halfway mark of the innings, South Africa were 3 for 84, after putting on what can only be described as a masterclass of reconstructing an innings. From there, Brevis and Miller were ready to build an advantage. They got 15 off the 11th over and 12 runs off the 12th over. The Proteas especially took a liking to Shivam Dube's bowling. But on his second over, Dewald Brevis went for 1 big shot too many, and South Africa lost their 4th wicket for 118. After the 4th wicket partnership, however, they had realistic hopes of putting on 200. In the same over that they lost that 4th wicket, David Miller brought up his 50. He reached that milestone with a 200 strike rate. After the 4th wicket, South Africa put on another good 2 overs, and it looks like they were ready to launch again. However, Varun, who was really taking a beating up to that point, did pick up the important wicket of David Miller in the 16th over, putting South Africa at 5 for 152. Varun eventually finished with figures of 1 for 47, and Miller was out for 63 off 35 balls. With that wicket though, India had all the right conditions to basically restrict them at the death overs. South Africa had 2 relatively fresh batsmen in, and Jasprit Bumrah, being an excellent death bowler, still had 2 overs remaining. And that is what India delivered off the next 3 overs. Between overs 17 and overs 19, South Africa only put on 15 runs and India picked up 2 wickets. However, they didn't get the wicket of Tristan Stubbs, who was facing up to Hardik Pandya off the last over of the innings. And wasn't he spectacular in that final over? 20 runs off the over. When Hardik sort of hit his Yorker length, he was able to dig out some 2s, and when Hardik missed his length, he found the fence, meaning South Africa put on a good total of 187. I believe that both teams would have mixed feelings going into that innings break. However, South Africa would have been the slightly happier of the teams given the fast start that India had, although I think India really would have rated themselves to chase that score down. The match so far had really been a great arm wrestle of a cricket match, which is to be expected when 2 high quality teams go into battle. What happened next though, I don't think anyone expected. First of all, Ishan Kishan, India's player of the tournament so far, was out for a duck in the first over. He basically tried to hit one against the spin, not a high percentage shot, and he skied it. Tilak Varma then was out next. He charged Marco Jansen, which really isn't an easy thing to do, and he nicked off. India were in trouble at 2 for 5, but I believe they had no reason to panic at that stage because South Africa had also stumbled early and managed to get a very respectable total. In fact, when the 3rd wicket fell, Abhishek Sharma off Marco Jansen, India and South Africa were in almost identical positions. India were 3 for 26 off 4.2 overs, a very similar situation to what South Africa were in. However, the difference maker was that Suryakumar Yadav and Washington Sundar weren't able to counter-attack at the same tempo that Miller and Brevis were in the first innings. These 2 batted quite slowly, and by the 7th over, the run rate required had already reached 11.5 runs per over. And once the required run rate got a bit too hot, that's when the wickets started to tumble again. It seems like every time India tried to accelerate in this innings, South Africa would pick up wickets. By the halfway point of the innings, Corbin Bosch had dismissed Washington Sundar and Suryakumar Yadav. India were 5 down at that point, and they needed to score at 13 runs per over. And when Hardik Pandya and Shivam Dube came in, they played pretty measured knocks at the start of their innings, which kind of suggested at this stage they might have had one eye on preserving the net run rate. When Keshav Maharaj bowled the 15th over, the run rate required already looked unattainable at that point, and he picked up 3 wickets, which set up South Africa for a massive victory. At this point, India were reeling at 8 for 88. Shivam Dube hit some big blows after this point to push India past the 100 mark before Marco Jansen finished up the innings with 2 more wickets of his own. South Africa with a massive victory by 76 runs. So what happened to India's batting? Were they just overconfident at the start? It really did seem like they were trying to play some overly ambitious shots. And why weren't they able to recover their innings in the same way that South Africa were able to? Is it a case that this team is just so good that they're rarely in bad positions with the bat? I mean, Abhishek Sharma's been in incredible form in the last couple of years at the top of the innings, which meant India have usually gotten off to a good start in their innings. And maybe as a result, these batsmen just aren't that experienced with recovering the team from bad positions. And this recovery after a bad start is the exact skill that South Africa executed so well. Should there be some concerns about India's bowling in that match? Guys like Hardik Pandya and Varun Chakravarthy are normally so effective for India, but they really struggled in that match. They both went for over 40 runs in the innings. Is the mystery gone with Varun's bowling for these IPL experienced batsmen? Will he be able to pull off a good performance against South Africa if they do come up against each other in the tournament again? I think this result is a combination of all these factors, but there is also a case to say South Africa did get slightly more favourable conditions throughout the match. Having said that, I do firmly believe that India is still the strongest team in this tournament and will ultimately win the World Cup. As for South Africa, this will give them a massive confidence boost, and I do think it's a performance that is reflective of the quality that this team has. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. Comment your thoughts on this game, and I'll catch you in the next one.